Have you ever woken up after a full night of sleep, yet you feel like you are dragging a 100-pound weight behind you? You look at your schedule, and instead of normal stress, you feel this profound, heavy irritability. The brain fog is so thick you can barely process a simple email, and by 3 in the afternoon, you are experiencing a complete emotional crash.
It is a universally recognized feeling, and almost universally, we blame ourselves for it. We think we are just not resilient enough, or we need more caffeine, or we are failing at managing our daily stress. We treat it as a personal, psychological failing.
Exactly. We describe sadness, anxiety, and exhaustion in purely emotional terms. We go to therapy to talk about our feelings, we read self-help books to change our mindset, and we assume that our emotions originate entirely inside the mind. But what if that is a complete illusion? What if the anger you feel in traffic or the sudden wave of anxiety before a meeting is not actually a psychological event at all?
That is the exact question modern neuroscience is asking, and the answers are paradigm shifting. We are discovering that mood is deeply, intrinsically inflammatory. What we experience as an emotional shift is very often a biological immune response. The sadness or irritability you feel might actually be a microscopic cellular alarm ringing inside your bloodstream.
It completely shatters the traditional boundary between the mind and the body. We have been taught for centuries that the human body is compartmentalized. The immune system fights off colds, the nervous system handles thoughts and reflexes, and the gut digests food. They were treated as isolated kingdoms.
But the biological reality is that they are in constant, rapid-fire communication. The nervous system, the immune system, the gut, the endocrine system, they are essentially a single, unified intelligence network. And the language they use to speak to each other relies heavily on inflammatory molecules called cytokines.
Cytokines. These are the biochemical messengers that usually deploy when we have an infection or an injury, right?
Precisely. When you get a cut on your arm, cytokines rush to the site to trigger inflammation, which is a necessary healing response. It brings blood flow, immune cells, and heat to fix the damage. But here is the fascinating part. When inflammation increases anywhere in your body, even if it is microscopic and invisible, your brain receives those cytokine signals. The immune system is essentially sending an urgent text message to the brain saying, "We are under attack down here."
And the brain actually listens to that and changes its behavior?
It has to. The brain constantly monitors the body's inflammatory state. When it receives those signals, the nervous system adapts. It alters how neurotransmitters function. It shifts your energy metabolism, and most noticeably, it changes your mood.
That is absolutely wild. It means my brain is continuously eavesdropping on my immune system. If my immune system is agitated, my mind becomes agitated.
That is a beautiful way to put it. One of the most profound discoveries in recent years is how this immune communication directly alters our emotional experience. When inflammatory cytokines cross into the brain's territory, they can actually disrupt the metabolism of serotonin and dopamine, the very chemicals responsible for our happiness, motivation, and drive.
So it is not just that feeling sick makes you feel sad, it is that the actual chemical pathways of joy and motivation are being hijacked by the immune response.
Exactly. When your inflammatory burden rises, your brain enters what we call a protective conservation state. Evolutionarily, if you were fighting off a severe infection, your brain did not want you going out to forage or socialize. It wanted you to hide in a cave, conserve energy, and heal. So it induced fatigue, low mood, and social withdrawal. Today, your body might just be inflamed from a lack of sleep or a highly processed lunch, but your brain still triggers that ancient conservation state. You feel heavy, unmotivated, and irritable.
You are essentially experiencing sickness behavior without the virus. But wait, I have to ask about the mechanics of this. For a long time, the scientific consensus was that the brain was protected by the blood-brain barrier. It was supposed to be this impenetrable fortress that kept the chaos of the body's immune system out of our delicate neural circuitry.
That view has evolved dramatically. The blood-brain barrier is indeed highly sophisticated, but it is not a solid wall. It is more like a highly selective border control. And we now know that systemic inflammation from the body can influence the brain in multiple ways. Sometimes, cytokines actively cross the barrier. Other times, they interact with the endothelial cells lining the blood vessels of the brain, causing those cells to release their own inflammatory signals directly into the brain tissue.
So the fortress can be breached, or at least the guards can be bribed into sounding the alarm inside the castle.
Exactly. And the vagus nerve acts as a direct superhighway, sensing inflammation in the gut and instantly transmitting that distress signal up to the brain. The result is that chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation in the body translates into neuroinflammation. The brain itself becomes metabolically stressed,
Meaning the fire in the body literally becomes a fire in the mind. Which brings up a really crucial point about the modern world. If our moods are dictated by inflammation, it feels like modern civilization is perfectly designed to keep us biologically inflamed.
It is an unfortunate reality. We are living in a deeply inflammatory environment. Think about the standard modern lifestyle. We are chronically sleep deprived, we consume vast amounts of ultra-processed foods, we are exposed to environmental toxins, and we sit staring at screens for 10 hours a day. Add to that the chronic, relentless psychological stress of modern work and social isolation.
It is like we are constantly striking matches inside our own bloodstream.
Precisely. None of these things might cause a massive, acute immune response like a broken leg would, but together they cause chronic, low-grade inflammation. The immune system remains partially activated all the time. It never fully powers down. The body is quietly burning in slow motion.
That gives me chills. Quietly burning in slow motion. It makes me wonder how many people out there think they have a mood disorder, or think they are just naturally anxious or lazy, when in reality they are emotionally struggling inside a chronically inflamed biology.
That is perhaps the most important insight of this entire field. We are pathologizing people's personalities when we should be looking at their physiology. Think about the sheer exhaustion that comes with this. Inflammation is profoundly energetic. Immune activation requires enormous metabolic resources.
Because the immune system is essentially an army, and armies need a massive supply chain to keep fighting.
Exactly. When inflammation rises, your body has to make a choice. It reallocates energy away from higher-order thinking, emotional regulation, and physical stamina, and diverts it toward defense and repair. The mitochondria, the powerhouses of your cells, actually shift their function. Their efficiency in producing ATP, which is cellular energy, declines in the brain.
So when I hit that wall at 3 p.m. and I cannot focus on a spreadsheet, and I snap at a colleague over a minor inconvenience, that is not just me being a bad employee or having a weak character. That is my brain experiencing an actual energy collapse.
It is metabolic exhaustion inside the nervous system. The inflamed brain becomes less energetically flexible. It simply does not have the fuel to maintain patience, complex problem-solving, or emotional resilience. Irritability is the sound of a brain running out of power.
That completely reframes how we should view our daily interactions. If someone is being highly reactive, our first thought shouldn't necessarily be they are a difficult person. It could very well be their nervous system is currently under siege. And speaking of being under siege, we cannot talk about inflammation without talking about the gut. It seems like every new study points back to the microbiome.
The gut is ground zero for a massive portion of our immune system. The intestinal lining is incredibly thin, just one cell thick in some places, and it is the primary border between the outside world and your internal biology. When we eat poorly or experience chronic stress, we can develop gut dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of bacteria and intestinal permeability, often called leaky gut.
Which means things that should stay in the digestive tract are leaking into the bloodstream, setting off those cytokine alarms we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The microbiome directly influences immune regulation. It also produces a vast amount of our neurotransmitters. When the integrity of the gut weakens, the systemic inflammatory burden increases significantly. And because of that vagus nerve connection, the brain feels it immediately. Mental clarity suffers, brain fog emerges, and metabolic dysfunction sets in.
It is a continuous loop. The gut gets inflamed, the immune system panics, the brain gets the signal, neuroinflammation sets in, and our mood plummets. It makes me realize that our mood might actually begin in our intestines, long before we even form a conscious thought about how we feel.
It is very likely that a significant portion of our emotional baseline is established by the state of our microbiome and our gut lining.
This leads me to a really profound philosophical question. If my patience, my focus, my stress tolerance, and my emotional regulation are all so heavily influenced by my biological state, what is personality? Are we just walking bags of chemistry?
It is a beautiful and slightly terrifying question. It absolutely changes how we think about temperament. We have always treated temperament as a fixed psychological trait. Oh, I am just an anxious person, or I have a short temper. But biology dictates so much of the bandwidth we have available to handle life.
Right? Imagine two versions of the exact same person. One has been eating processed food, sleeping 4 hours a night, and has a leaky gut. They are inflamed, fatigued, and highly reactive to the slightest criticism. The other version of this person is sleeping deeply, eating whole foods, and has a calm immune system. They are clear-headed, resilient, and patient. They are the exact same person with the exact same memories and traumas, but their personalities appear completely different.
Because an inflamed nervous system behaves fundamentally differently from a recovered one. Sometimes emotional volatility is not a psychological weakness. It is simply physiological overload. The system is screaming for relief.
That is such a compassionate way to look at human behavior. It removes the shame. When we view our dark moods or our anxiety as moral failings, we just add guilt on top of the exhaustion. But if we view it as biological heat, it gives us a roadmap to actually fix it. Which brings us to the most important part. How do we cool the fire? How do we reduce this hidden inflammatory burden in a modern world that is constantly trying to ignite it?
We have to shift our focus from treating the symptoms to supporting systemic recovery. And the incredible thing is that the tools to do this are largely accessible. It starts with sleep. Deep, restorative sleep is when the brain literally washes away metabolic waste and the immune system resets. Without sleep, you are fighting a losing battle against inflammation.
Sleep is the ultimate anti-inflammatory drug. What else?
Movement. Muscle contraction releases anti-inflammatory molecules that counteract the inflammatory cytokines. Then there is metabolic health and anti-inflammatory nutrition, focusing on whole foods, diverse fibers to support the microbiome, and healthy fats that protect the brain. We also have to prioritize stress regulation.
Because psychological stress literally triggers the biological immune response, right?
Exactly. The body does not know the difference between running from a predator and worrying about a mortgage payment. Both trigger an inflammatory cascade. So practices that regulate the nervous system like breathwork, spending time in nature, and genuine human connection are not just nice-to-have wellness trends, they are biological imperatives. They signal to the immune system that it is safe to stand down.
It is about sending a consistent signal of safety to the body. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to live in a sterilized bubble or never eat a piece of cake again.
Not at all. The goal is not perfection. The goal is simply reducing the chronic physiological overload. You want to build a resilient system that can handle occasional stress without getting stuck in a chronic inflammatory loop. Because when inflammation decreases, the nervous system literally thinks differently.
Clarity emerges when the biology cools down. It is such a hopeful message. It means we are not trapped by our moods.
We have far more agency than we realize. By changing our biological inputs, we can fundamentally alter our emotional outputs.
It makes me look back at so many moments in my life. Periods of intense anxiety or weeks where I just felt a heavy, unexplainable sadness. I used to think I was failing at life, but perhaps many of those emotional storms were never purely emotional at all. Perhaps they were just biological heat signals. My body was asking for recovery, and I was trying to outthink it instead of just giving it rest.
It is a realization that changes everything. Because deep inside human physiology, the immune system and the mind are completely inseparable. They are two sides of the exact same coin. And sometimes, finding peace does not begin with wrestling with your thoughts or analyzing your past. Sometimes, it begins simply with cooling the invisible fire within.
A profound reminder to listen to the silent sparks before they become a wildfire. Thank you for taking us on this incredible journey into the biology of emotion.
It has been a privilege to explore it with you.